Welcome to the Power Platform Tips Show. This is the official podcast of CRM Tip of the Day. And George is here with me. How are you doing today, George?
I'm good. We still can't decide on the name, it seems.
Yeah, so this episode is brought to you by MSCRM Add-ons Document Core Pack. If you don't know about it, Document Core Pack is the number one solution for professional document creation, processing, and document automation in Dynamics 365.
Yes, on multiple projects. In fact, that's kind of our go-to solution for Dynamics when you need to generate documents. Look, we had good success and have great support. One thing I can say, what we did have a good document production system we put in place is where we had to use multilingual. I never had to deal with the right to left documents before, and trust me, it's kind of it's a challenge. And Document Core Pack was up to this challenge. It's I wouldn't say it didn't care what language it is, but it handled all the different conditions just nicely.
Yeah, so we've had customers do 400, 500-page document templates that have complex menu logic, and one case I saw where somebody had a process that would generate a document, email it to somebody, store it in SharePoint, and print it out, and stored it as a PDF, not a Word document, all in like one step using a workflow. So yeah, we're big fans of Document Core Pack. So check them out.
Oh, if you haven't seen it, it sounds like one of those XKCD cartoons about .norm files, where you photograph a spreadsheet with the numbers and paste it as an image into a Word document.
Yeah, so check them out at...
500 documents. You have to check sanity of the customers who want to print 500-page documents.
Where it was insurance companies, and insurance companies have, like the medical claims history forms and things like that. They can get quite large.
Fair enough, but we never had problems, and the workflow part works really nicely. If you want to control what happens to your document after it gets generated or before it gets generated, it's got a bit convoluted, but that's kind of given. Workflow system to control how it gets generated in Dynamics Online. So have you used that? It's kind of, it gives you a fine control. It's a bit twisty, but works fine once you master it. So there are a few moving parts, but it's Document Core Pack definitely number one for us.
So check them out at mscrm-addons.com, and we thank them for sponsoring the Power Platform Tips Show. So the concept of this is, I thought we would just go through our last week or so of tips of the day. We were kind of taking a break earlier in the year, and we've had a lot of tips recently, partly because I started working on doing real work for projects again. So that's always helpful to find tips.
And part of it, we've got a big pipeline with the readers sending us tips, and we can't respond to every single one individually, but most of them are in the pipeline. So if you send us a tip like a month ago, even 2 months ago, and it still hasn't shown up, the good chances are it's in the pipeline. So it's just a matter of wrapping it up, typing it up, checking the images, this and that. So it takes a bit of time to prep each tip. So just bear with us, and thank you very much.
And we are tip of the day, not fixmycrm.com. So if you send us questions like, I'm getting this error message, what should I do about it? We probably won't answer that question. We probably don't know. We can't troubleshoot your system unless you want to pay us big bucks or something.
Big bucks.
But
big bucks.
If you have some nifty tips or things that have helped you, those are the kind of things we're looking for. So let's just go back, and this is about the last week. So the first one, tip 1224, this is one I wrote, and found out it's not really unsupported. But unsupported, keep in mind, unsupported doesn't mean it won't work. Unsupported means Microsoft, doesn't test this scenario, and so. But my philosophy is, if they didn't want you to do it, they wouldn't let you do it. And the fact they let you do it means that, proceed at your own risk. And this is, in the new embedded Canvas apps, what I discovered was, you can actually go and take an existing Canvas app, and if you find the app ID, you can specify that, then hit the configure button on the embedded Canvas apps to launch that app, and it will then insert the model-driven form integration into that app. And I found out through some feedback that is not officially supported. Again, doesn't mean it doesn't work. And part of the reason it's not supported is because that basically makes that pre-built app non-usable outside of Canvas apps. So you want to keep that in mind if you do this unsupported trick, that if this is an app your users use, you don't want to necessarily do this because you're basically turning it into it. I find it useful though, because I think there's a big use case for for embedded Canvas apps that aren't even necessarily in context of the record. Because let's say I wanted to have certain documents on OneDrive that are available to sales reps that are part of the sales process. And I don't need to make that conditional based on that. I see a lot of value in building those components in a Canvas app and embedding that in. And if you build it ahead of time, sometimes it's just easier. You might already have something built you want to save a copy of and then put in there. So I still say, knowing the potential issues with it, I'm not saying I won't do this, but I would just be mindful that it's not something that you're breaking something.
So if you have an existing app,
yes.
What should I do? Save as and then embed it?
Well, you could, yeah. So if you need to keep your original app,
yeah, I do. Let's say I do. People use
so
it.
you could save as a new copy, and then you go in and add the control for the embedded Canvas apps. And when you see the app ID, there's a little pencil, and you hit the configure property, and you put the app ID. And tip 1224 tells you how to get the app ID. And then hit the configure button, which will launch that app in PowerApps Studio, and it will add the model-driven form integration component to that pre-built Canvas app. And so my thought is, if they don't want you to do that, why did they give the configure property button and let you do it? It just seems like
it's an oversight. I don't know. Look, the one thing I would say that if you are building a model-driven app today and you're thinking you might be using embedded Canvas, I would say just earmark like placeholders. Stick in like 10 dummy embedded Canvas apps in there. You may not use it, but at least IDs will be there, pre-generated, wired up, and so forth. So.
Well, I'll give you an example, and this really came from a webinar scenario that I was doing. I wanted to show an embedded PDF document, but I wanted it to be full screen, where if you create your app from the embedded Canvas app control, it always puts it in the phone form factor. So I guess it's designed so it fits in a nice responsive column. But if I want one to be bigger than that, now maybe there's a way for me to change the dimensions from that. I don't know. But I just found it easier to just go pre-create one using the tablet layout and then embed that in after the fact.
Tablet. Well, responsive is common, right? So it's not a big deal. So we'll move on. 1225. And for those of you who kind of try to follow a read, if you just go crmtipoftheday.com / and then the tip number, it will get you straight to there. So crm.com, tipoftheday.com / 1225 run on demand workflow. I think we've seen kind of bits and pieces of that popping up, but that was write up by one of our readers. Shailesh Wath. He sent us this tip some time ago, and we got around to publishing it. It's still actual. So what's happening is that you run unified interface, and then you find that run workflow button is not there. Basically, there are a few steps enabling it, and run workflow has been moved to under flow button. So you need to enable your flow button for the workflows on demand to appear. And there are a few steps to do that. The one step that people know about is configuring settings within the org or within the instance. And we did show kind of modern way to do it through admin control, PowerApps admin center. The one thing that people tend to forget is the licensing. So the user who runs it needs to have a flow license. So sometimes in enterprise environments, people are selective which checkboxes of customer engagement plan license are ticked. Do you find that, Joel, that in enterprise people go and untick a lot of those boxes?
I think
no. When you do the licensing, when you go into Office 365 licensing, you select customer engagement plan, and it comes with the plan, with the flow, with the PowerApps, with Office Online, with the social engagement, blah, 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 and it's like 15 of those boxes. Sway, to do, whatever.
Well, my customers check it because I tell them to.
No, it's not checking, it's more about unchecking, because they check by default. But anyway, it's a good place to verify. If it still doesn't show after you enable it in Dynamics, still doesn't show, check that your user has a flow license enabled for them. So,
right, and this was a good tip. I'll admit I don't think I've run an on-demand workflow in Unified Interface yet, and so if I hadn't read this, I wouldn't have known where to look for the. I wonder if this is some scheme by Microsoft to help people get accustomed to flow, thinking I want to run an on-demand process.
Well, if it's some scheme, it's kind of backfiring because people getting angry. Where's my beloved workflows? At the end of this tip, I think listeners would be glad we didn't start the week prior to the last one, because that was the week of the portal tips. I was working on portal documentation, and I still got about like 10 or 15 of those tips to go for the portals. Once you start digging in, it's kind of hard to stop.
You can read those tips. On Nick Dolman's podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Next one is yours.
All right. So tip 1226: avoid model-driven failure. And this has been my life recently, as every project I've been with is going to Unified Interface. I've had a lot of questions about, why can't I see this form, or why don't I see the app in my menu? So I just made a list of kind of top 6, and it's a non-exclusive list. There's non-exhaustive list. There's other things there, but just giving somebody access to an app isn't enough. You need to make sure that their security role has the model-driven app privilege. You need to make sure that their role is granted privilege to the app and the components within the app. So, like if one of the forms or one of the dashboards, one of the process flows, if their role doesn't, just giving them access to the app isn't enough. And you got to give it. So I've even seen this with some of the standard apps, like the app for Outlook. I've seen in several projects where some users will fire up the app for Outlook, and instead of seeing the standard, form or dashboard in the app for Outlook, they'll see another dashboard, and it's useless. And turns out you've got to go in and not only give them access to the app for Outlook, you have to give them the app for Outlook permission. You have to give them their security role, access to the app for Outlook, and you need to make sure that dashboard has the permission for the app for Outlook. And we've also seen where if one of those forms, like the form that the Outlook app has there's several forms for activities and leads and other things like that are in that app for Outlook dashboard. some users disable those thinking, oh, I don't need that view, and then they get this view cannot be found. That was another one of our tips. So just kind of making a list of what you got to think through, because App Designer is easy, and that's feedback I get from everybody. People love App Designer that I've shown it to, but it doesn't take long to create an app, but making sure that you have security, everything. My hope is that can take a while. My hope is that Microsoft kind of streamlines that, and if I say, hey, I want to give access to this app, it should give access to the forms and the dashboards within it. I can see there's some cases where you don't want that to happen, but it's just a little bit kludgy and something that trips people up. So that's 1226. So the next one I think was yours.
But before that, I just wanted to ask you, Microsoft tends to, when they create an app like customer service app or portal app, they tend to create a role specifically just to access the app. Do you do that for your apps?
I haven't. Maybe that's a good idea, but so would you create a? Because what I'm thinking is, even within an app, like the customer that went live this week, they have a model-driven app, but they've got like the CSR and the CSR customer service manager.
Oh no!
So
this role wouldn't have any entity permissions in there. It's just an access role.
It's a naked app.
Naked role, yeah.
Basically, with nothing in it, and you're just using it. Yeah, I've done that before. We've done that for forms specifically. I don't know if I've done that for an app. It's not a bad idea. I'm just, I still haven't quite figured out when you get more than, say, a dozen apps, how do you keep it from becoming unwieldy? Most customers I've seen have at most 1 to 3 apps.
Well, what I yet to figure out is how to clean up home.dynamics.com, because it's full of apps that I didn't ask for, and there is no way to clean them up, and they're not Dynamics apps. It's like to do and look at this app and look at that enterprise app. I didn't ask to put in my enterprise anyway, so but that's a separate conversation. So next one is use CDS instead of Dynamics 365 connector in flows and in PowerApps. So where did it come from? Is people started complaining that Dynamics 365 connector, and there are 2 connectors in there. Well, there used to be 3, or at some point even 4, like experimental. But now I think there are 2. The one Dynamics 365 connector, another one CDS connector. And I think you did tip before that use CDS connector because you wanted to filter selected record by the scope, like whether it's user scope or whatever. But there are other reasons why you should select CDS connector. Well, to start off, as some of the readers commented, is that CDS connector is a premium connector, right? And Dynamics is a free one. So my answer is that most of the users would be within the realm of Dynamics 365. So all you need is like P1 license. Anything above that would give you access to premium connectors. So anyway.
So premium doesn't mean you have to pay more to use that connector. It means you have to be properly licensed for it.
Yeah.
So what would be the scenario where you would have access to the Dynamics but wouldn't be able to use the CDS connector? Team members?
Team members, correct. And I did send. You've seen my screenshot where it stops you. It stops you from using the premium connector. So when you even try to create one, it states that you're not licensed properly. So team member wouldn't be able to. Any other license would give you access. So,
but you could do a team member plus a P1 or something.
Correct. Yeah, it's like for Flow, it's like $5 a month extra. So
the weird place we're in right now. I mean, I think
Can I finish my tips first?
Yeah, finish your tip. Then I'll say I'll be my contrarian.
Yeah. So the reason to use, there are multiple reasons to use. First of all, lately people reported that Dynamics 365 connector on record created, updated, and so forth triggers not consistently. Let's put it this way: sometimes it doesn't trigger, but then it sits in a pipeline and re-triggers when you run manual tests, and so on. So there's a little bit inconsistency how Dynamics 365 re-triggers. The other big advantage is that CDS connector has a concept of default environment. So when you package it and you kind of with the solution and you move your solution to another environment, let's say from dev to prod, you don't have to repoint your connector to the prod instance. Whilst with Dynamics 365, if you point it to an instance, it sticks, and you have to actually point it to a different instance when you deploy that connector. So that's another reason, and one of the arguments for not using it is that CDS on record selected hasn't been consistent in giving all the column values when it's triggered. I'd say, look, for now, just do the get record when you trigger it on selected. That would give you all the values and use those values. Moving forward, those are kind of gaps and inconsistencies that are going to be resolved. So that's it. Now, what did you want to say?
Well, what I was going to say is I agree 100% that you should use the CDS connector wherever possible. The things I've found that I've had to use the Dynamics connectors for were, and maybe this has changed, I think this is actually in the release notes, but CDS connector did not have the idea of run on create or on update, whereas you had to do either create or update. And so if you wanted something to fire when a contact's created or when it's updated, you'd basically have to create two flows. And the other piece of it, at least this is a couple months ago, so maybe this has changed. But the big reason I found for using it on update is the D365 connector, excuse me, would not let you specify what fields were updated when you updated the record. So it would fire every time you updated the record, where the CDS connector lets you put in the fields that are updated along with the scope. So generally I would use it, but the one thing that kind of made me use the D365 connector was I wanted something to run on create or update, but I think that's coming in the April update.
It is indeed, like an upsort trigger. The next one you want to take the next
so
one.
this was a tip for tip 1228, control your default destination. This was another one that came in from the tip jar, and that was from Shadin Heridas. And Shadin gave me this tip, or sent it to us, and then coincidentally, later that day, one of my project managers sent me a question asking to do that. So I first saw this, I didn't know. You sometimes see things that seems kind of simple, but then I got thinking about it, and I don't think I knew how to do that. So the idea is, when you type in georgedubinsky.crm.dynamics.com, if your environment was set up more than 6 months ago, it probably defaults to the classic
JoeLindstrom.com.
Hey, yeah, that's my production environment. So the idea is, well, what if I'm going away from classic UI and instead I want to see the unified interface or the app selector? And there's a simple setting. Now, this is one of the things that if you're still going to the settings area of the classic UI to change your settings, you want to start using the Power Platform Admin Center at admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com, because all the settings that are in the classic UI are there, plus a few more. There's this behavior area, and one of those settings is open in classic mode, on/off. And so if you turn that to off, it will always open into the classic UI and into the unified interface. Now, that doesn't shut off the classic UI. The way to do that is, I think, go into the app designer and remove all security roles from the default classic app. But this is a good tip, because if you want to make the users don't want to type in there, go to classic, and don't want to remember the slug at the end of the URL to go to their specific app. This is a good tip.
Okay, which brings the last tip for the week, tip 1229. Now, the full disclosure that it's been inspired by Dynamics IDEas, experience.dynamics.com/ideas, where you can submit your ideas for Dynamics 365. Now, that has been split a bit. So you still submit your Dynamics 365 ideas there. PowerApps ideas, on the other hand, have been moved to PowerApps community. So just make sure that you pick up the right place to submit your idea. Some people said, "Oh, my idea is gone." No, they haven't gone. They've been moved to PowerApps community. Can you insert links to? I don't remember the URL for PowerApps community. It's PowerApps dot.
Yeah, I'll find the link. I'll put in there.
Dynamics.com, maybe. Don't remember. Anyway, so someone picked up saying the chat looks surprisingly kind of leveled up. You've got new pipeline with over 60% of ideas or bugs are new. Then you've got completed one, which is kind of looks like a quarter of new, but it's actually just over 3%. So how you make your chat look good? And then sort of started as a joke and saying, who you guys trying to fool? And then we kind of discussed it and came to the conclusion, well, no one's trying to fool anyone. It's just we're trying to show more or less kind of figures on the chart, but figures are too far apart, by number of magnitudes, and you try and kind of to not to fool anyone, but just to demonstrate, to show the figures, but they are kind of 1 and 10,000 and anything in between. So what you do is, in PowerApps or in Excel for that matter, you change your scale to logarithmic scale, and the effect it tends to have, people always ask, oh, what's used for? Well, the effect it tends to have is basically think of bringing the values closer together on the display chart. So if you have like a 1 and 10,000 on logarithmic scale, it's kind of they brought closer together. And you can see, like I even included a simple GIF animation. You can see what effect it has, and that's exactly what's happening. So you just take the values and just basically logarithmic scale. Would you disclose to your users who use some charts that you use in logarithmic scale?
Yeah, I don't know. So I was thinking about this when I saw this. So when you're in the airport and you see the Salesforce banner that says Salesforce #1 CRM, and it shows them at like 17%, but it's like a mile above Microsoft, that would be the opposite of logarithmic, right?
Oh, that would be, yeah, the opposite would be exponential scale. I don't know, yeah, that's the only reason to use it, exponential. So if you've got like 16% and 18%, but you want to show them miles apart, the exponential scale, the reverse of logarithmic scale would be the one to use, yes. Well, that was the last tip for this week.
Yeah, so it's been good. For a while we had a dry spell, and every time I think we run out of tips, we get a tip bomb, and I find a bunch of problems and get a bunch to write about. So hopefully.
And then we get new release and notes and new bugs, and yeah, absolutely. So we've got a good pipeline. So it's been fun explaining tips. So I think for the first one.
Yeah, and hey, if Steve Mordew can do a podcast reading his blog, why can't we?
Oh, we're doing one better. We're not reading it; we're explaining it.
Yeah, this is like the director's commentary on the movie.
Ooh.
All right, well, George, you have a good week, and keep tipping.
It's been fun. Take care.